I'm Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of this newsletter is going to be Her Rock, Her Mountain. I've got an email here from a viewer who actually got dumped because he wasn't doing enough. You've probably seen the video I did the other day called The Illusion of Action. That's doing too much pursuing, over pursuing. Well, in this particular case, this guy was too much of a cold fish, and his girlfriend was obviously dealing with her father, who was in the process of passing away, and instead of being there for her, he just kind of was a cold fish and let her deal with things, and then afterwards she dumped him and said, hey, you just weren't there for me. So this is a good flip side of the equation of not pursuing enough or not letting her know, being there for her to open her up emotionally. So, because you've probably heard me talk about this in the past, it's like you got to learn the balance between pursuing too much and not pursuing enough. And in this particular case, this guy didn't pursue enough. He didn't invest enough energy in the relationship. And that's why you've probably heard me say that the guy should do no more than 20 to 30% of the calling, texting, pursuing, initiating. And it's always a good rule of thumb to notice that, because you don't want to go to the extreme where you don't call at all and you don't make any effort. I mean, obviously, if your girlfriend is blowing your phone up 2 or 3 times a day, sending you texts, sending you messages, you're never initiating anything at that point. But obviously, if she's going through a tough time, she likes to know that you're there for her and that you want to listen to her and you want to get her to talk about these things. Because women work through their problems and their issues by talking about them. It's kind of like the pressure relief valve on a water heater. If the pressure gets too great, the valve opens and lets the excess pressure come out instead of the water heater just blowing up and obviously all the water going all over the place and ruining your house and your carpet and the drywall and everything else. So it's really important because that creates bonding not only with your girlfriend or your wife, but with people in general. Because when somebody's got something going on and something's really they're struggling, whether it's your boss or your best friend or a family member of yours, just getting them to talk about things. Because I deal with a lot of vets that are dealing with PTSD amongst other things in their life, and what a lot of vets tend to do, because they see some really horrible, awful things in warfare, and a lot of them just want to hold it inside and not talk about it, and that's absolutely the worst thing that you can do about it. You need to talk about those things with people that are willing to listen and that can understand, and just having somebody that's listening and pay attention and is really like, wow, and getting them to share that stuff and talk about it, that makes you feel better. Because not only does it make you feel like the other person sincerely cares about you, is that it relieves the tension and the emotions that build up in you. Because when you don't express what's inside of you, that actually gets stored as muscle tension in your nervous system. So you got someone like that's maybe suffering from PTSD. Their body is stuck in a physiology of fight or flight. That's another reason why I love network care so much, is it just helps to dissolve all of that tension and get you back to a relaxed and peaceful state where you're not feeling so angry and stressed and freaked out all the time. So before I get into this guy's email, I've got a quote that I'd like to share with you. And it says, "A man must be his woman's rock, her mountain, when it comes to being away long distance or dealing with the death of a loved one. A man should always be his woman's source of unbending masculine strength and safety. It is his job to open her up emotionally when she is closed down to him due to life challenges, her dark days, or the pain of losing someone else. The worst thing a man can do when his woman is hurting and suffering is to run away and hide to give her space. All that will make her feel is that you don't care about or love her. You must open her up by asking questions and encouraging her to share what she's feeling so she can heal it and become her playful and loving self again." You've probably heard me say is that women work through their problems and their issues by talking about them. And so for some guys, they have a real hard time with this in this particular area. So let's get right in this guy's email. He says, "Hey Corey, I've been applying what I've read in your book and the knowledge that I got from viewing your videos. And I've been told by my father with certain women I should apply the 3% as much I shouldn't apply the 3% as much as I do. Well, the 3% man is being well-rounded in all areas. It's knowing when to hang back, but also knowing when you need to be more fully present, especially in this particular situation where she's dealing with the loss of her father. He says, I use the same techniques on all women. He feels that I don't need to use it across the board with everyone. Well, that tells me you don't know the information in my book. To you, being a 3% man is being a cold fish and playing games, and that's not what I teach. You obviously don't know the information in the back of the book that has to do with communication and long-term relationships, because if you don't understand that piece, that's exactly what will happen. Is you'll end up getting rejected and dumped by being too cold and distant. He says, in March of this year, I met a female and we started dating fast and heavy. I meet her on a Saturday and we made out the following Thursday I met her on a Saturday and we made out that following Thursday on our first date. Awesome. Obviously, she was really into you. He says, we were going at it hot and heavy, and within weeks, she said she was in love with me. Obviously good. You were doing a good enough job there to get her to fall in love with you. He says, 1.5 months into our dating, she was hit with bad news. Her father's cancer got worse, and she went home to take care of him in New York. We both currently live in Georgia. 2 weeks after she got to New York, her father passed. I'm 41 years old, and I've been lucky to have never had to deal with someone close to me dying, like a parent, a sibling, or a best friend. Well, I've lost a lot of people along the way in my life. A lot of high school buddies, friends of mine, family. My mother passed away almost 10 years ago. All my grandparents are dead, and so I've had a lot of people that were close to me have passed away, and that's just part of life. Everybody you love and everything you build in this world eventually is going to turn to dust. And that's why I say the only thing you can really do is find a way to enjoy it. And in this particular case, what can be really helpful to your girlfriends when you're talking on the phone is getting her to talk, but also joking around and being playful with her. Remember, whatever she's feeling when she's talking with you is what she's going to associate with you. And so even though she might be discussing something that's really hard and really difficult, you can joke around and tease her and be playful because it gets her out of that state because she's already dealing with a horribly unpleasant experience. And if you can kind of be an escape from that to where, yes, she can share her hard feelings and become emotional and become upset, and when she's crying and bawling her eyes out and her mascara is running down her face, you can say, baby, you know what? I think you're so fucking sexy when you're being totally emotional. I'm really honored that you feel close enough to me that you can just totally let it rip. I had a girlfriend years ago that she was really still trying to get over an abusive relationship that she had before me, where this guy was emotionally abusive to her, and she was afraid to cry in front of me. And we were sitting in my car, and I said, "Baby, just let it rip." She's like, "You," and she just like fucking totally lost it and started crying. I was like, "You're so fucking sexy. You're so hot." And so not only she's crying and like snot's coming out of her nose, but I'm also making her laugh at the same time, which is also called a pattern interrupt. And so it had a good experience because not only she's feeling the negative emotions, but I'm in a playful way letting her know that it's okay and it's safe to be that. And then after that moment, she was always, if she needed to cry or whatever, I was always there. And I'd pull her in and hug her and she'd cry and I'd wipe the snot off her face and her nose. And that's part of being a man. It's part of being a rock, part of being her mountain. Because it makes her feel safe and comfortable. I'm her, because when little girls are little girls, their daddy are the ones whose lap they sit on and cry. Well, when you're in a mature adult relationship with a woman and she wants to break down, if you know what you're doing and you follow the communication skills I talk about in my book, to me it's a beautiful thing. But a lot of guys, they don't know how to deal with that. They want to fix things, and all you really need to do is to be present with her 100% and let her cry. If you've ever seen a mother and how she's fully present with her child when her child's crying or is upset about something, that in essence is what you need to do. You need to encourage her to talk about it. You need to encourage her to feel those emotions, good, bad, positive, because women want to know that you love all of them, because women aren't always happy and bubbly and pleasant, and there's sometimes that they're going to be upset and they're going to be bitchy, or they're not going to be in a good mood, or they're going to feel sad, or they're going to feel depressed, and they want you to love them through all of that. He says, I had 2 dogs growing up, and after each of them died, I was in bad shape for a long time. Losing my dogs has been my only experience dealing with death in my life thus far, and even after 3 tours in Iraq, I never had to deal with immediate death. Well, you lucked out, dude. It doesn't sound like you had a lot of extensive combat experience. Maybe you were on a base all the time, and lucky you, because a lot of friends, it's like my dad when he was in Vietnam. He spent most of his time on base. He had to worry about getting woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning with mortars coming in and blowing up the base, and then sappers crawling under the wire and slitting the dude's throat who fell asleep in guard tower, and shit like that happened. But his brother, my uncle, he was a Marine. He was out in the shit 24/7, and he was one of 2 guys that came back from his unit because everybody else was either dead or too severely wounded to return to combat. So if you didn't see a lot of heavy combat, it's like you're fucking lucky, dude. He says, I felt if I said certain things, I would bring up some memories of her father, and she may go deeper into depression, which is she's getting treatment for, along with treatment to assist her with sleeping. So it's like when she's talking, it's like, well, tell me, what are you feeling, honey? Tell me. And as she's talking, and she's like, she'll tell you how she's afraid and she's fearful, and it's like, and then you can change her state, even though she's feeling emotional. Well, what do you love about your dad? What's the greatest takeaway from that? What things do you love about your father? How did he make you into the amazing, sexy, hot goddess that you are today? And she'll giggle and laugh, and she'll tell you that as she's crying. And like I said, if you keep her laughing throughout the process, even though she's relieving those emotions, you'll help her feel better. But if you just withdraw from it, it's kind of like you're afraid. You're afraid to deal with it, and you don't know how to handle it, and so you just withdraw, and that's expressing weakness in this particular instance. He says, so I said as little as I could. I told her I never lost anyone, and I can only imagine how you're feeling. Remember, don't try to solve her problem. Let her talk. That's how women work through their issues. He says, if you need to talk, I'm here. Well, that's the whole thing. She wanted to talk, and then you give her some logical excuse, and then you withdraw from the conversation. Well, if you really meant that, you'd be fully present until she talked to the point where she says, oh, I'm so glad we talked. I feel so much better. I love you, honey. You're amazing. Well, I love you too, sweetheart. I can't wait for you to get your ass down here. I can't wait to see you again. Maybe you should have flown up there to see. He was like, well, I want to come see you. I want to be there for you. It was like, well, I'll just come up for a weekend and get your mind off of things. It's like, when's a good time? Just book the fucking flight and go up there for a weekend and hang out and be her rock. He says, when she got to New York, she would initiate text or call, and I would do the same the next day. I knew she would be busy making arrangements, consoling family, and dealing with her loss, so I didn't worry about her responding as she did when we started dating. The time frame for this was about 30 days. And this time it got to the point where I wouldn't hear from her. I would initiate contact and still wouldn't hear from her, so I decided to wait and let her come to me. When she didn't contact me, she had so much going on that she had to rush off the phone. This was no problem, and I understood her time with me was minimal. The reason she didn't stay on the phone was because she didn't feel at that point like you could handle it and you knew how to deal with it. He said she saw a problem with me not constantly trying to contact her, along with not asking her when she was coming home. That tells me that she didn't feel special to you anymore. She didn't feel loved. In other words, it's like she had this icky stuff going on in her life, and you just kind of pushed her away because you didn't know how to deal with it or didn't want to deal with it. He says, I didn't ask because her family needed her more. She needed you to be her rock, bro. He says, I didn't want her to think I was rushing her back to me or give the impression I was trying to make her choose between me and her family. She just wanted you to be 100% fully present with her. He says, I did tell her that I miss her, and I would send cute texts or poems to make her feel better. When she got back, I was in a training exercise at work, and I got little to no cell reception until the next day. I'm in the Army. By the way, thank you for your service. He says, so I may be slow to respond to her or can't communicate the way she wanted me to, and she knew from before when I'm in training it's best for me to get back with her when I'm out in the field. So she calls me one day and says, I'm breaking up with you because I felt you weren't there for me when I needed you. I tried to explain, he says, mistake number one, because I was using logic when she was being emotional. I admitted I may have not communicated how you wanted me to, but I figured you needed space, and when you needed to talk, you would contact me. So what you're basically doing is you're justifying your actions, and that's not what she wanted to hear. What you should have done was just say, well, what do you mean, honey? Tell me more. Don't leave anything out. I want to understand where you're coming from. I want to understand why you feel this way. And you didn't do that. all you did was further reiterate that breaking up with you was the right thing to do, because she's trying to communicate with you, and you're using logic and reason to justify your actions. And all that communicates to her is it just what she thought, that you don't really love her and you don't really care about her. So he says, I told her I thought I was making the best decision by giving you space and not bothering you too much so you can grieve with your family and heal together without my influence. You fucked up, bro. You totally fucked up. He says, my father told me not to use too much of the 3% with her. Again, you don't understand what I teach in my book. That tells me you don't know the material that well. And that's why I say you got to read this stuff 10 to 15 times. If you don't know this stuff, you're going to fuck up. And because a lot of guys say, oh, I just want to know how to pick up chicks. I just want to know dating skills, man. I want to know how to get laid. I don't need all that communication shit. And it's like, you don't know this stuff, and this is what happens. It's like you get her to fall for you, but when she really needs you to be there, it's like you totally got deflated by this situation because you weren't prepared. He says, you're the master of 3%, so I would like to know what you think. If I applied too much with her, I applied it in the wrong or some way. Yeah, you definitely applied in the wrong way, but you had a knowledge gap. You didn't know what to do because you didn't know the material well enough. He says, it's been weeks since I heard from her and I moved on to someone new. I want to make sure I don't repeat anything wrong with my new girl. That's why you need to immerse yourself in my book. And you need to get good at getting women to open up to you, because this is obviously only a month and a half into the relationship, and the first time she really needed to have you good at opening her up and talking and diffusing all of those emotions. You weren't prepared because you didn't study that stuff. You didn't, all you thought about was playing games, being distant, acting cold, acting aloof, being indifferent, and this is what happens. And I'm sorry that it happened to you, but this is how you learn. You learn from your fuck ups, and everybody that's watching this video, guess what? They're learning from this as well. So if you're watching this and you haven't read my book a dozen or so times, you don't know the material well enough, and this is what happens. It creates a blind spot. And if you've ever been driving in a car and you go to turn and you check the last second to see if somebody's in your blind spot, that's what happens. This is the kind of shit that you think you know it and you got all this stuff together, and then boom, you get rejected, you get dumped, and it's just obviously not fun. So this is unnecessary. This shouldn't have happened, but hey, you learn from your mistakes. So that's what you need to do. You need to get to the point where, and obviously if this is something that you obviously weren't doing well enough when you were dating her as well. You weren't getting her to talk. Because women like to talk about things. That's how they work through their problems. And so whether they're upset with a girl that they work with, or they got a family member that's ill, or they're fearful about their career or whatever, you got to get in the habit of saying, what do you mean, honey? Tell me more. I'm not sure where you're coming from. Don't leave anything out. And as she's talking, just keep going, what else? Until she goes, oh, I'm so glad we talked. I feel so much better. I love you. Until you hear that, it's not diffused. She hasn't gotten all of it out, and that's why you need to keep her talking. So you should get in the habit of that. When you're in a relationship with a girl, and she wants to start talking about something, and you go, do you want me to listen or do you want my advice? She goes, no, I just want you to listen. She's got to get to that point where she sighs. She says, oh, I feel so much better. I'm so glad we talked. That's what you have to do. So if you'd like to get my help personally with a challenge that you're having, the quickest way to get my help is to book a paid phone coaching session or a Skype session if you're outside the US or Canada. And if you're going to send me an email, you got to keep in mind I'm 4 or 5 weeks behind with my email, so don't send me an email and expect to hear back from me in 24 hours, because it's simply not going to happen. You're just going to have to get in line. I answer emails when I've got time, but if you want, because I've got to spend my time focusing on my paying phone and Skype customers. And I will talk to you soon.